There are some words that hit you like a physical blow. A betrayal so sharp it steals the air right out of your lungs. Mine were, "We don't celebrate with you anymore." That's what my son, my only son, told me when I called to wish him a happy birthday. No hello, no preamble, just that flat, dead sentence. It felt like a door slamming shut, not just in my face, but right through the center of my chest. I stood there, phone in my hand, the afternoon light stretching across my kitchen counter, and for a second I honestly couldn't breathe. 51 years I'd been his mother. And just like that, I became someone they decided to uninvite from their lives. I didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't beg. All I said was, "All right," and hung up. Then I sank into the chair at the kitchen table. The very table where I'd baked countless birthday cakes for him when he was small. I stared at the chair where he used to insist on sitting cross-legged, a 6-year-old king on his frosting-smeared throne, laughing so hard he'd hiccup. The noise, the mess, the way he'd lean into my side when he was tired. I remembered it all. I just hadn't realized he'd stop remembering too. I boiled water for tea I didn't want, watching the steam rise like a ghost. My hands were shaking, but not from anger, not even grief. It was something colder, something much deeper. A kind of knowing I'd tried for too long to pretend didn't exist. They don't see me anymore. Not really. Wesley, my son, my only son, hadn't come over without needing something in more than a decade. "Mom, can you co-sign this loan? Mom, can we stay with you for a bit? Mom, could you transfer that pension money this week?" And I always did. Not because I was weak, but because I truly believed love was service. I thought if I stayed useful, they'd remember who I was to them. Now I see it with painful clarity. Usefulness isn't love. It's a lease. And they've decided not to renew it. This house is quiet these days. Thelma, his wife, used to bring the kids over sometimes, but that stopped about 3 years ago. "Too much going on," she'd say. "I got it. People are busy." I just never thought they'd get too busy for a birthday call or a shared meal. And now I've been told I'm not part of the family celebration at all. I sat there until the tea grew cold, until the light shifted and the shadows stretched long across the linoleum floor. Then I got up and opened the drawer where I keep the old birthday cards. I've saved every single one. The crayon scribbles, the crooked hearts. One year he wrote, "Mom, you're better than a dragon." I smiled then. I told him that story about dragons guarding treasure, and he'd thought it was the highest compliment. I think it still is. I folded the phone bill, sliding it into the folder where I keep the house documents. My name is still on everything. They'd hinted over the years about putting things in order, about safety, about transitioning the property. Wesley even said, "It's not about trust, Mom. It's just practical." I nodded then, but I won't nod now. If I am no longer worth celebrating, then I am no longer a convenience either. That night I didn't sleep much. I watched the moon rise out the east window and thought about what it means to be erased from your own life by the very people you gave it to. I didn't cry, but I made a promise to myself. This time, no more silence. No more waiting for invitations that won't come. I have nothing left to lose. And that, my dear, is a kind of terrifying freedom. When Wesley was young, his birthdays were events. I'd start planning a month in advance. Pirates, astronauts, cowboys, he loved themes. I'd sew decorations from fabric scraps, bake cakes in impossible shapes, handwrite invitations for his classmates. I never did it for praise. I did it because when he smiled, when his eyes lit up, the whole world seemed worth it. That was before cell phones, before quick texts, before hollow thanks with no eye contact. I remember his 8th birthday like it happened yesterday. He wanted a space party and we had no money that year. George had just been laid off, and we were stretching every dollar like taffy. But I stayed up all night making planets out of papier-mâché, hanging them from the ceiling with fishing line. The cake had silver sprinkles and marshmallow meteors. He hugged me so hard he nearly knocked me over. "Best mom in the universe," he'd said, his voice thick with cake. I think about that now and I wonder, did that boy disappear entirely? Or is he still in there somewhere, buried under adult obligation and polite cruelty? The last birthday I hosted for him was his 40th. He hadn't asked for anything, but I surprised him anyway. Invited a few close friends, cooked his favorite stew, even bought balloons. Thelma rolled her eyes the whole evening. He's 40, not 4, she'd whispered to me in the kitchen. But Wesley smiled. He kissed me on the cheek when he left, said, "Thanks, Mom. You didn't have to." And I replied, "I know. That was 11 years ago." Since then, I'd been downgraded from mother to errand point, from home to mailing address. I opened my ledger that afternoon. It's not fancy, just a spiral-bound notebook I've kept in my side drawer for years. Every time Wesley needed help, I wrote it down. Not because I wanted him to pay me back. I knew he never would. I did it so I wouldn't forget that I mattered, that my help wasn't invisible. Loan for car repair, $2,000. Bridge mortgage, $5,000. College deposit for Mia, my granddaughter, $3,500. Medical bills for Thelma's dental work, $100. Birthday trip to Cancun, unplanned emergency credit transfer, $1,800. The total, more than $30,000. Spread across 15 years. Not once did I receive a thank you card. Not once did they offer to return even a dime. It was always framed as temporary, or we'll sort it later, or you're a lifesaver, Mom. And I suppose I was. But I think they started believing I'd never stop saving them. The bank was quiet when I walked in. That sterile, too cold air that always makes my skin prickle. I knew the teller, a young woman named Brenna, always kind, always patient. I asked to freeze the automatic transfers. She looked at me with raised eyebrows. "Oh, are you sure, Mrs. Hartley? We have a few scheduled for your son's account." "I'm aware," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Please cancel them all." She nodded, fingers flying over the keyboard. "Would you like to set a new password on the account, just in case?" "Yes," I said. "Let's do that." I left with a printed receipt and a strange sense of peace, like exhaling after holding your breath for too long. That night the phone rang. Not Wesley. Not yet. It was Thelma. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "Hey, did something go wrong with the transfer this month?" Wes said nothing came through. "No, nothing went wrong," I said. A beat of silence. "Oh, okay. We just weren't sure. Things have been tight." "I'm sure they have," I replied. "But I've decided to take a break from funding grown adults." There was another pause, this one heavier. "Is this about the birthday?" she asked, a hint of accusation. "No, primelit. This is about boundaries." "You're being dramatic," she muttered. "You know we appreciate everything you do." "You appreciate my money, not my presence," I said, then hung up before she could spin it another way. I stood by the window afterward, watching the porch light flicker on. A moth bumped clumsily against the glass. In the house across the street, the Wilkins were having dinner. Laughter spilled from their windows like warmth. I used to think my family was like that. I used to believe my love could hold us all together. But some things fall apart because no one else is holding on. The next morning, I opened the kitchen drawer and pulled out the folder I'd marked Property and Essentials. I hadn't touched it in a long time. Not since George passed. It held the deed to the house, the insurance policies, George's will, and a few notes I'd scribbled in the margins of old legal documents when the kids started casually suggesting that I consider signing the place over. "For your peace of mind, Mom," Wesley had said one Thanksgiving, "it'll be easier to manage down the road." Thelma's approach was sharper. "You're one fall away from needing round-the-clock care," she'd muttered while wiping her hands on my dish towel. "Selling now means you can move into a proper place with help. They're building those new senior condos. It wouldn't be a bad thing." I smiled then and said I'd think about it, but inside something had clenched. I've lived in this house for 42 years. I brought my son home from the hospital to this house. I nursed George through his last months under this roof. Every corner knows me. The chip in the tile by the fridge? I dropped a casserole there the day I found out George's cancer was back. The scratch on the living room floor? Wesley made that, dragging his science fair volcano too fast across the hardwood. This house remembers what my family has forgotten. I placed the folder on the table and sat down with a pen. I wrote a note addressed to no one in particular. This house is not up for negotiation. Not now, not ever. I folded it and slid it inside the deed. Then I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. Andrew Morrison has been our family attorney for some 20 years. He helped with George's will and my living trust setup. He's about Reed's age, maybe younger, but smart, quiet, respectful. He didn't ask questions when I said I needed to make an appointment. Just said, tomorrow morning 10 a.m. I slept better that night than I had in months. The next day I put on my navy cardigan, the one with the pearl buttons, and walked the 3 blocks to Andrew's office. He greeted me with a firm handshake and a kind smile. "What can I help you with, Mrs. Hartley?" I sat across from him, my bag on my lap. "I want to adjust my trust," I said. "And I'd like to make sure no one can touch this house while I'm alive." His expression didn't change. No raised eyebrows, no patronizing tone, just a nod and a flick of his pen. "I can set that up with a life estate clause. You retain full control until your death. Then the property transfers according to your wishes." "And I'd like to revise those wishes," I said. "The current beneficiaries. I need to make changes." "Understood," he said. "Who would you like to name instead?" I thought about that for a moment. Reed's face came to mind. The way he looked at me last Christmas when I told him the story about George's fishing trip. The way he listens. The way he sees me. "My grandson," I said. "Reed. He gets the house. And the accounts?" I added. "I don't want anyone else accessing them without my written consent." "Done." "And Andrew?" "Yes. If anyone from my family tries to contest this, I want you to remind them that I wasn't dead when they stopped treating me like I was alive." He didn't blink, just nodded. When I left the office, the air smelled like fall, crisp with a hint of burning leaves. I passed a bakery and bought a small cherry tart. I hadn't had one in years. I used to make them for George when we were first married. He'd eat 2 in one sitting, always complaining about the seeds, but never leaving a crumb. I sat on a bench outside and ate it slowly, not thinking, just tasting for once. That night Wesley called. "Mom, we need to talk." "I bet you do," I thought. His voice was tight, controlled, the kind of tone people use when they're trying not to shout, but are already shouting in their heads. "I heard from the bank," Wesley said. "And from Andrew." Of course he had. "I see," I replied, folding laundry at the kitchen table. A towel, 2 pillowcases, a cardigan I'd meant to give to Thelma once. Now I thought I might keep it. "You froze the transfers and changed the trust without even talking to us." "To you," I corrected. "There's no us when it comes to my legal rights." He exhaled sharply. "Mom, this is ridiculous." "No," I said. "It's overdue." There was a pause. I imagined him sitting at that pristine dining table of theirs, the one I helped them buy after the flood ruined their old place. I could almost hear Thelma in the background, whispering like a snake with a script. Asterisk, tell her it's about her safety. Tell her she's confused. Tell her she needs help managing things. Asterisk, Wesley came back on the line. I don't understand what's going on with you lately." "You don't?" I asked, folding the last towel with precision. "No," he snapped. "You're acting like a stranger." A short laugh escaped me before I could stop it. "Wesley, I've been a stranger to you for years. You just didn't notice." "That's not fair." "Neither is lying to your mother about a birthday dinner." Silence. "I didn't want to hurt your feelings," he mumbled. "No, you didn't want me there." "Say it." More silence. "And then it was a dinner for friends. It wasn't meant to be formal." I let the words hang. They sounded small, even to him, I think. "Well," I said, smoothing the laundry pile, "now you've got your wish. I won't be at your dinner tables, and I won't be in your checkbooks either." "Jesus, mon." "I'm not angry, Wesley," I said quietly. "I'm tired." He said nothing more, and I didn't feel the silence. Eventually he hung up. I didn't cry. Not even a little. That surprised me. Instead, I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat on the porch. The air smelled of damp leaves. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. The world felt remarkably unchanged. Even though something huge had shifted inside me. I watched a single brown leaf detach from the elm tree and spiral to the ground. Graceful. Quiet. Final. Asterisk, by the way, if you're still with me, if this story is resonating, please take a second to hit that subscribe button. It helps me share more unbelievable, deeply human stories like this one. Asterisk. The next morning my doorbell rang. It was Mia, my granddaughter, 23, fresh from a semester abroad in Spain, wearing a coat that probably cost more than my monthly pension. She had her mother's sharp jaw and her father's eyes, though hers were softer, less burdened. "Grandma," she said, her voice tight with annoyance. "Dad's really upset." "I'm sure he is," I replied. "Would you like some tea?" She stepped inside without answering. In the kitchen I poured 2 cups. She sat across from me, arms folded. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Doing what?" "Cutting everyone off, freezing money, changing documents." "I'm reclaiming space," I said. Her eyes narrowed. "That sounds like something from one of my sociology classes." "It's something from my life," I said calmly. "I've been everyone's backup plan for too long." She frowned. "You wanted to help." "I did. And I wasn't wrong to. But I was wrong to believe help buys kindness or respect." She tapped her fingernails against the mug. "So that's it. You're done." "No," I said. "I'm just starting." She scoffed, but it didn't feel cruel. More like confusion wrapped in youth. "So you'll just sit here alone and feel what? Proud?" "No," I said. "I'll sit here and feel free." She stood up, brushing imaginary lint from her sleeves. "You're being selfish." "I've been selfless for 50 years, I said. "Maybe it's time." She left without another word. No hug, no goodbye, just the soft slam of the screen door behind her. I didn't run after her. I didn't apologize. I just finished my tea, warm and quiet in my own kitchen. That afternoon I took a walk. Nothing long, just around the block, slow and steady, my cane tapping a rhythm against the pavement. The trees were still holding on to their last colors, burnt gold and stubborn red. I paused outside the old Lambert house, now owned by a couple with 3 loud little boys. Their laughter spilled through the windows, high and sharp like the shriek of summer birds. I used to think noise meant chaos. Now I think it means life. Back home, I sat by the window with a notebook and a cup of weak coffee. I'd barely written anything in years, just grocery lists and names of pills. But now, my pen moved without hesitation. "Read." I started the letter with his name and didn't stop writing for 10 minutes. I told him not everything, not the details about the bank or the trust. He'd find out soon enough. But I told him what mattered. That I loved him. That I saw how kind he was. That I trusted him with more than my secrets. With my memory, my worth, my story. When I finished, I folded the paper and placed it in an envelope. I didn't write his address. I'd give it to him when the time was right. The phone rang just as I stood to get more coffee. I expected Wesley again or Thelma, but it was Reed. "Hi, Grandma." His voice still carried that soft hesitance, the one he'd had even as a child, afraid to say too much too soon. "Hi, sweetheart. I talked to Dad." Of course he had. "He's mad," Reed said. "I imagine. He said you're cutting everyone out of your life." I smiled. "No, just the ones who only come for what they can take." He didn't laugh. He was quiet. Then, "I don't want to be one of those." I felt something loosen in my chest. "You never were." He sighed. "Do you want me to come over?" "Yes," I said. "But not to talk about your father. Just to have tea, just to sit." "I'll be there in 20. When Reed arrived, he brought a paper bag from the corner bakery and his old college hoodie that made him look 12 again. We didn't speak much at first, just tea and cinnamon buns and the ticking of the kitchen clock. Then he said, "You're not wrong, you know, about the way they treat you." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. They talk like you're a chore, like helping you is some kind of tax they have to pay. I blinked. "You listen closely." He shrugged. "It's hard not to when I care." I placed a hand over his. "You're the only one who's ever asked me how I feel without needing something after." He looked away, embarrassed. "You deserve better than them," he said, voice low. "I deserve better than I've allowed," I corrected. "But that changes now." He didn't argue, just nodded. Before he left, I handed him the letter. "Don't open it yet. But keep it." He held it carefully, like it might be fragile. "I will." When the door closed behind him, The silence didn't feel so heavy anymore. It rained the next morning, a slow, deliberate drizzle that blurred the edges of everything. I stood by the window, watching the drops race down the glass, each one dragging pieces of the sky with it. The house was still too. Still, but I didn't feel lonely. I felt paused, like something important was about to begin. At 10 o'clock sharp, I went to the lawyer's office. Andrew was already waiting, papers neatly stacked on his desk, a pen polished and placed precisely at the top. "We can formalize everything today," he said. "You'll retain life estate rights. The property goes to Reed upon your death. Non-contestable. The accounts will be locked with single signature authorization. Yours." "Good," I said. "Would you like to inform your son of this directly?" I looked at him. "No," I said. "I think the silence will speak louder." He nodded, then passed me the documents. I signed without hesitation. Not because I was angry, that part had passed, but because it was time. I'd spent too long living with one foot in someone else's plans. Now both feet were firmly under my own roof. When I got home, I placed the signed copies in the fireproof box I keep under my bed. Alongside them, I tucked a short letter to myself. Asterisk, you've done what they never expected. You chose yourself. That's not betrayal. That's survival. Asterisk, the doorbell rang mid-afternoon. For a moment, I thought maybe Reed had come back, but when I opened it, I saw Thelma. Her umbrella dripped all over the porch, and she was already frowning. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside. "Come in." She didn't take off her coat. She didn't sit. Just stood near the kitchen doorway, as if afraid the house might trap her. "I heard about the trust," she said. "From Wesley. I imagine he's having a difficult week." She scoffed. "You're being unreasonable." "I'm being clear. Cutting us out of everything." "I didn't cut anyone," I interrupted. "You walked away. Years ago." She crossed her arms. "You're overreacting. This whole thing with the birthday dinner." "Don't," I said, voice low. "Don't pretend that was an accident. You and Wesley lied. You excluded me. And I'm done pretending that didn't happen." "I was trying to protect the evening," she said. Asterisk, it wasn't the place to include the woman who raised your husband? Who helped pay your dental bills? Who watched your kids when you were busy? Asterisk, her face flushed. "This isn't about money." "No," I said. "It's about value. And I finally understand mine." She looked around the kitchen like it might help her argue, like the faded curtains or the scratched countertops would suddenly make me smaller. "I just don't get why you're doing this now," she said, voice thinner. "Because I've finally remembered who I am." Thelma shook her head. "Wesley won't let this go. He doesn't have to let it go. He just has to let me go." She didn't have an answer for that. She turned and walked to the door, her steps sharp against the floor. "I hope you know what you're doing," she said before leaving. "I do," I said, for the first time in a long while. When the door closed, I exhaled. The kitchen was still warm with the smell of morning toast. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, black this time, no sugar, strong, just how I like it. Later that evening, I pulled down the box of old photos from the top shelf of the hall closet. The cardboard was worn thin at the corners, the tape yellowed and curling. I carried it carefully to the table and opened it as if it contained something fragile. And in a way, it did. My whole life, flattened into snapshots. There was George in the garden with his sleeves rolled up, dirt on his cheeks, and a grin so easy it made my chest ache. That was the summer he built the trellis out back. Said the roses deserved something strong to climb on. There was Wesley, age 5, covered in chocolate and shame after sneaking cake before dinner. His eyes were wide, guilty but laughing. And there I was in the background, holding the spatula and pretending not to see him. Back then, the lies were harmless. I laid out the photos in rows, like evidence at a trial only I could preside over. I hadn't thought about George much these past few weeks. That surprised me. But now, seeing his face again, I heard his voice as if he were in the room. "Don't let them turn you into a pocketbook with a pulse," he'd said once. He'd laughed, but his eyes had been serious. George had a quiet way of seeing things before I did. He'd warned me gently about the way Wesley and Thelma leaned on me. They love you, Joe, he'd said. But they take too. You need to remind them you're a person. I didn't listen then. Not really. I told myself I was just helping, the way parents do. I thought love was supposed to cost something. And it does, but not like this. Not your whole self. I picked up one of the older pictures. The day George and I signed the papers for this house. He wore a new tie. I wore lipstick I never liked. We looked like people who believed in something permanent. I wonder what he'd say now. I think he'd be proud. Maybe not of the rift in the family, but of the fact that I finally stopped sacrificing myself to preserve it. After dinner, I wrote him a letter. I hadn't done that in years. Asterisk George, they finally pushed me too far. And this time I didn't flinch. I remembered what you said. That letting people drain you dry isn't love. It's slow disappearance. So I stopped disappearing. I said no. Not loudly. Not cruelly. Just finally. I wish you were here. You'd laugh at how Wesley's scrambling. You always said he needed a firm hand. I gave it to him. Love. Late but steady. And for once I feel like I can breathe. Asterisk I folded the letter and placed it inside the photo box right on top. The phone rang once that night. I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't in the mood for second chances dressed up as guilt. Instead, I lit a candle on the windowsill. Something I used to do when George was away for work. Not to signal anything, just to remind myself the light was mine to keep. It was just afternoon when I saw them. The neighbors across the street, the Wilkins. I'd known them since their youngest was in diapers. Now he was tall, clumsy, and mowing the lawn with one headphone in. They were having what looked like a casual Saturday lunch, the kind with mismatched plates and laughter through an open window. I sat with my tea watching, not out of envy, not anymore, but from a place of stillness, observation. There was something about their rhythm, the ease between them. I couldn't remember the last time my house had that kind of noise. I used to blame myself. Told myself I hadn't done enough, hadn't been soft enough, hadn't pushed hard enough. All of it swirling like fog in the back of my mind. But watching the Wilkins, I saw it clearly. They chose each other again and again. That's what made it work. Not blood, not duty. Choice. And my family? They'd chosen distance. They'd chosen me only when I was useful. That's not family. That's convenience. Later I swept the back porch. An old habit I'd abandoned. The broom felt good in my hands, solid, familiar. I used to do it every Saturday like clockwork when George was alive. He'd tease me for sweeping dust into the wind, but he always brought out a chair and kept me company. Halfway through, I noticed something under the bench. An old pair of garden gloves, stiff with age. I picked them up, turning them over. Inside one was a folded note, yellowed with time. George's handwriting. Joe, don't forget the roots run deep even when the surface looks dry. I sat down on the step, gloves in my lap. I must have read that note a dozen times. He'd written it during one of our fights with Wesley back when he was still living at home, bitter and restless and loud. George had tucked the note into my gloves before I went to prune the roses. Ide furguten. Or maybe I hadn't been ready to understand it. Now I was. The roots run deep. I spent the rest of the afternoon in the garden. The roses were tired, overgrown. I trimmed carefully the way George taught me. Always at an angle, always with respect. You don't just hack at something that blooms, you shape it, guide it. By sunset, I was sore and dirty and completely satisfied. I made myself a simple dinner, eggs and toast, and sat by the back window while I ate, watching the last of the light stretch across the yard. And then for the first time in months I laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because I felt light, clear, like maybe I was starting to come back to myself. He showed up the next morning just after 10 o'clock, without calling first. I saw his car pull up too fast, tires skidding slightly as he parked. Wesley always drove like he was racing against time, even when he had nowhere to be. I didn't open the door right away. I made him ring the bell twice. Old instinct, maybe. Or maybe I just wanted to remind him this house isn't a hallway he gets to walk through uninvited anymore. When I finally opened it, he was already fuming. "We need to talk," he said. "I assume that's why you're here." He stepped inside without waiting. He always used to do that. Even as a child, he'd barrel into rooms like air itself owed him space. I didn't offer him coffee. I didn't ask how he was. I just sat in my chair by the window and waited. "You've made things very difficult," he started, pacing like a lawyer rehearsing closing arguments. "With the trust, with the accounts, with the silence." "I haven't been silent," I said. "You've just stopped listening." His mouth pressed into a line. "Look, I know we've had tension, but freezing us out, that's not the answer." "No," I said, calm. "It's the result." He stopped pacing. "What does that mean?" "It means when you ignore someone long enough, they eventually learn to live without you." He ran a hand through his hair, already thinning. "This is about the birthday, isn't it? It's about years of birthdays and holidays and quiet dismissals, and we'll call you soon. And we can't make it this time, and we forgot to." His jaw clenched. "We have lives, Mom." "So do I said. He laughed bitterly. "You sit in this house and water dead plants." "No," I said. "I water roots that are still mine." For a second he looked like he might cry. But pride got there first. It always does. "We needed your help," he said, quieter now. "You were part of our system." "That's the problem," I said. "I wasn't your mother. I was a system." He sat down then on the edge of the couch, hands clasped between his knees. "I didn't think it would come to this. You didn't think I'd ever say no." He looked around the room at the familiar furniture, the photos, the faded rug he spilled juice on as a boy. "Reed told me you're leaving everything to him." I nodded. "You're punishing us." "No," I said gently. "I'm protecting myself." He stood again, pacing slower now. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," I said. "That's the point. I'm done asking." He stopped in the middle of the room. "So that's it?" "Yes," I said. "That's it." He looked at me like he didn't recognize the shape of my face anymore. "I used to be your son." "You still are," I said. "But I am no longer your supply." He didn't slam the door when he left. He just walked out like a man forgetting something but refusing to go back. When the house was quiet again, I sat in the silence and let it settle. It didn't feel empty. It felt earned. The message came 2 days later. Not a call. Thelma never liked confrontation that required her voice. It was a text. For sentences, each one colder than the last. Asterisk, I think we all need to calm down. None of this is irreversible. You're still part of this family. Even if you're upset. Let's stop punishing each other. Asterisk, I stared at the screen for a long time. She'd worded it like a peace offering, but it read like a threat. None of this is irreversible. As if what I'd done was some emotional tantrum that could be undone with a few clicks and a signature. No apology, no accountability, just a veiled appeal to guilt. I put the phone down without replying. Instead, I went out into the backyard, gloves in hand, and started weeding. There's something honest about soil. It doesn't care what you've done. Doesn't ask questions. If you give it time and a little patience, it gives back. It was nearly noon when I heard the gate creak. "Grandma." I turned. "Reed." He stood there holding a brown paper bag and wearing that same sheepish look he used to have when caught sneaking cookies. "I brought sandwiches," he said. "Turkey and one of those sparkling drinks you like." I nodded toward the porch. "Come sit." We didn't talk while we ate. Just the sound of wrappers, the breeze through the leaves, a few crows gossiping overhead. After a while he leaned back and said, "Dad's spiraling." I expected he might. "He thinks you're trying to erase him." "No," I said. "He erased me. I'm just acknowledging the blank space." Reed winced. "That's a rough thing to hear about your own dad." "It's rougher living through it," I said gently. He nodded, eyes on the horizon. "They think you're being manipulated." "By whom?" "Me." I actually laughed at that. "You? You haven't even figured out how to fold fitted sheets. What power could you possibly have over me?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "They don't understand this version of you," he said. "That's all right," I said. "I'm not sure I do either, but I like her." We sat there until the sun dipped behind the fence, the light catching the edges of the garden like gold in old hair. He helped me bring in the plates, rinsed them without being asked. Before he left, he turned and said, "I read your letter." I paused and he looked down. It made me cry, but not in a bad way. I didn't say anything. I just hugged him. The kind that says you're still my heartbeat in all this. When the house was quiet again, I checked my phone. Still no follow-up from Thelma. Good. She came over the next morning. Dorothy. We hadn't spoken in a few weeks. Not since that coffee date where she warned me, like she always did, with her signature tilt of the head and a hand on her hip. You're too good to them, Joe. Always have been. She didn't knock, just let herself in through the side gate and tapped twice on the glass of the kitchen door. I opened it and said, "Took you long enough." She grinned, handed me a bag of warm scones. "You sounded different on the phone last week. I figured I'd give you room to bloom." We ate at the table, scones split, butter soft. She watched me like a woman waiting for a confession. "Well," she said finally, wiping crumbs from her sweater. "You did it." "I did. Cut them off. Cut the ties that cut me first." She raised her eyebrows. "And how do you feel, Queen Joan?" I smiled. A little scared. A little like I've been wearing someone else's shoes for 50 years. And I finally took them off. She nodded. "It's strange, isn't it? Reclaiming yourself. People think it's loud. It's not. It's quiet as a breath." We sat in the silence that only real friends can keep without guilt. Then she said, "I always wondered when you'd stop being their yes woman." I looked at her, curious. "Why didn't you say something?" "I did," she laughed. "Every year since 2009. I chuckled. Fair enough. Dorothy was one of the few people who knew the full picture. How Wesley had come slowly at first, then regularly, always with needs dressed up as emergencies. How Thelma used guilt like thread, stitching herself into my finances, my routines. How birthdays turned to transactions, holidays to obligations. "You didn't just say no to them," Dorothy said. "You said yes to yourself. That's the part people miss." I nodded, feeling that truth settle somewhere in my chest like a warm stone. Later, after she left, I sat on the porch again. My world had grown smaller, yes, but not emptier. Just refined. Dorothy had left a note with the scone bag, folded neatly. Asterisk, "Proud of you, woman. Proud like rain loves the roof it lands on. You're home now." Asterisk, I tucked it into my kitchen drawer next to the garden gloves. That night, I slept without dreams. He knocked this time. I knew it was him before I even looked through the window. There's a rhythm to how a person knocks. His was too loud, too fast, like he was still a boy demanding to be let in after breaking curfew. I opened the door slowly. Reed stood there, rain on his jacket, eyes uncertain. In his hands was a cardboard box, small, light, the kind you'd use when you don't know whether something is precious or disposable. "I went through the garage," he said. "Found some things." I stepped aside. "Come in." He put the box on the kitchen table, brushed water from his sleeves. For a minute, we just stood there. 2 generations between silences. Then he lifted the lid. Inside, an old pair of binoculars George used to take birding, a stack of faded recipe cards in my handwriting, a broken music box that used to sit on Wesley's dresser, and a small leather-bound album I didn't recognize. He passed me the album. "Photos," he said, "from the cabin, I think. And before I was born." I opened it slowly. There we were, George and I newly married, faces sunburnt and stupid with love. Wesley maybe 7, grinning wide with a tooth missing. And one of all 3 of us by the lake, George holding a fish and me holding a sandwich, and Wesley trying to splash us both. I hadn't seen those photos in years. "They almost threw this out," Reed said quietly. I looked up. "Who?" He hesitated. "Dad. Thelma. They were cleaning out the garage last weekend, and I saw this in the donation pile." I closed the album gently. Of course they were. He sat down across from me, his shoulders tight. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't ask for what. I didn't need to. They don't talk to me much anymore," he added. "Because you're kind to me." He nodded. "I told them it wasn't right. He said that you deserved better. That we all owe you more than just memory." I reached across the table, took his hand. "You owe me nothing. You gave me something real. You showed up." His throat moved, A swallow of things he wouldn't say out loud. I don't know how to fix them, he said. You can't, I replied. They chose this. We sat for a while, the rain ticking gently against the roof, the smell of old paper and cold coffee between us. Then he asked, Are you angry? I thought about that. Really thought. No, I said. Not anymore. I'm disappointed. I'm sad. But mostly, I'm done pretending. He exhaled like that gave him permission. Do you think they'll come around? He asked. They might, but I won't be waiting. That night, after he left, I placed the photo album on the mantel. The house felt different somehow. Not fuller, not louder, but clearer, like I could finally hear myself think. It had been years since I did something just for the pleasure of it. Not out of duty, not out of tradition, not to keep a promise or fill a silence, just because I wanted to. So I went to the cafe on Oak Street, the one with the chipped tables and the piano no one plays. I used to walk past it on my way to the bank, always meaning to stop in, never actually doing it. Too busy, too tired, too many reasons. But that day, I wore my good coat, the dark blue one with the stitched cuffs. I brushed my hair, added a little lipstick, not for anyone else, but because I missed how it felt to be deliberate. When I walked in, the air smelled like coffee grounds and lemon sugar. A boy with a nose ring smiled at me from behind the counter. What can I get you? A slice of the lemon loaf, I said. And coffee black. He nodded, rang it up, didn't blink when I pulled out cash instead of a card. I liked that. Too many people act like you're a relic if you don't tap something to pay. I sat by the window watching people pass. A woman with a stroller, two teens with headphones, an old man walking his dog, each of them moving at the same slow, contented pace. I ate the lemon loaf slowly, savored it. I couldn't remember the last time something tasted that clean. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. My money, my decision, my joy. Later that week, I went to the community theater alone. I'd seen the flyer at the post office. Steel Magnolias, one weekend only. The kind of thing I used to love, but hadn't dared go to without someone on my arm. But now, I figured I'd earned the right to go anywhere, arm or no arm. I wore my mother's brooch, sat third row from the front. The lights dimmed, and the room hushed, and for 2 hours, I didn't think about trust funds or frozen bank accounts or who had stopped calling me. I just sat there and let the story soak in. At intermission, a woman beside me said, You came alone? I nodded. Good for you, she said. Wish I had the nerve. I smiled. It's not nerve. It's clarity. When the show ended, the cast took their bows, and I stood with the rest of the crowd. I clapped until my hands stung. Not just for them, but for me. For showing up. For staying. For returning to myself. I walked home in the cool night air, the stars faint but present. I took the long way, past the bookstore George used to haunt, past the lot where Wesley broke his arm falling off his bike. So many landmarks of a life I once built for others. Now I walked past them like a traveler, remembering, not regretting. When I got home, I took off my shoes, poured myself a glass of water, and sat in the dark for a moment. No noise, no motion, just me. And I realized something. I wasn't lonely. I was alone. There's a difference. And I had never felt it so clearly. I wrote him a letter. Not out of anger, not out of grief, but out of something simpler. Completion. There were no accusations in it. No lists, no tallies, no flashbacks meant to wound. Just the truth. The kind that lives in quiet spaces between people who've stopped pretending. I addressed it to Wesley, not my son. Because that's what this was. A letter from one adult to another, from one soul to another, stripped of the roles we failed to fulfill for each other. Here's what I wrote. Asterisk, you don't owe me love. That's not how love works. It can't be traded, bargained, expected into existence. But I don't owe you silence. For years, I thought being a good mother meant being available, being agreeable, being ready with money, advice, food, forgiveness on demand. No matter the cost to me. And I paid willingly, repeatedly. I paid with time, with health, with the dimming of my own name. But something shifted. And no, it wasn't the birthday. It wasn't a single slight. It was years of shrinking to fit into a space where I was only wanted when I was needed. You made a decision. Many of them, actually. You chose to withhold kindness. You chose to let me disappear from your life by inches, while still reaching out your hand when something was needed. That's not a relationship. That's a resource extraction. So I made a decision to. I chose to stop disappearing. That doesn't mean I hate you. It doesn't mean I wish you harm. It means I'm not offering myself up anymore for the illusion of closeness. You don't want me. Not really. You want the memory of me that was useful, passive, compliant. That woman is gone. There's a new one now. One who walks alone, eats lemon cake at cafes, goes to the theater without a chaperone, laughs with neighbors and sleeps without waiting for the phone to ring. I don't need your apology. I don't even need your understanding. But I do need space and dignity and the peace that comes from finally choosing myself. Joan. I folded it, sealed the envelope and left it unmailed. Not out of hesitation, just, I didn't feel the urgency anymore. I'd said what needed saying. Sometimes the power isn't in being heard. It's in knowing you've spoken. That evening I sat in the backyard again, a blanket over my knees, cup of tea in hand. The roses were blooming late, stubborn little things pushing against the season's edge. I admired them for that, for refusing to wilt on schedule. I watched the wind move through the trees, not loud, not fast, just steady, certain. And I thought, I have no more arguments to win, no more dinners to beg for, no more calls to wait on. I have a house, a name, a life, and finally I have myself. Morning again. Light filtered through the curtains in thin golden lines, laying across the kitchen floor like memory. I moved slower these days, not from weakness but from intention. I poured the water, measured the tea, sat down at the table like I had somewhere to be. And I did. Here. With myself. No calls, no knocks, no emergencies disguised as affection. Just the gentle hum of the refrigerator, the birds outside the window, and the sound of a life realigning itself into something honest. I put on the radio, not loud, just enough to fill the corners. Classical, something with strings. It reminded me of Sunday mornings with George, how he used to sway gently while frying eggs, like he thought the music couldn't work without his body lending rhythm. I smiled. The paper was still folded beside my plate. Headlines I didn't care for. The weather I already knew by the scent of the air. I skipped the front page, flipped straight to the crossword. Halfway through my second cup, I heard a knock. Not at the front door, at the side. The kitchen entrance where people who know you best come in. I opened it and found Reed. No box, no errands, just him. I was walking past, he said. Thought I'd see if you were up. I gestured to the table. I'm always up. Come in. He sat, helped himself to tea. No need to ask. That's the thing about people who truly know you. They don't knock to perform. They knock to arrive. We talked about nothing important. A neighbor's dog, a bakery that closed. The way birds always seem to know when winter's coming, even before the calendar does. Then he asked, do you miss them? I didn't lie. Sometimes. Would you take them back? I stirred my tea. Not as they were. Not if the price is erasure. He nodded. I think they thought you'd come around. I did, I said. Just not the way they meant. He smiled. Not wide, not forced, just the quiet smile of someone who's seen you walk through fire and come out warm. When he left, I walked him to the gate. He kissed my cheek. See you soon, he said. And I believed him. Inside, I sat down again, the crossword unfinished, the sun higher now. I looked around at everything that was still mine. The chipped mug, the ticking clock, the silence I no longer feared. They shut their door on me. That much is true. But I opened one for myself, and what I found on the other side was not bitterness. It was space. It was calm. It was me. So if you've been waiting to speak, to stand, to finally draw the line they keep crossing, let this be your sign. You're not selfish. You're remembering. You're allowed to come back to yourself. And if this story touched something quiet in you, something old, something fierce, then don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Leave a comment. Let someone else know they're not alone. What would you have done if you were in my place? I really want to know.